Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Emotional Intelligence Today, What It Means to Lead with EQ, presented by our Head of Leadership Growth at Educate 360, Dr. Jay Pugh. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I will be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Dr. J.
Thank you so much, Mariella. Appreciate it and great to have you all. Welcome to this webinar. We're going to have a lot of fun today. The main focus we are going to get into is what does it really mean to lead with EQ? What are we changing in our approach? What does that require? Why is EQ so important? So we're going to focus our attention there and we're going to have some fun along the way. So I'm going to kick this off. I always love to do these webinars. I love to ask you all the questions as we go through. And so one of the things that I want to ask is when we talk about what intelligence looks like as a whole, is intelligence something that is learned? Is it innate? What does that actually look like to you? How do you define intelligence? And if you want, feel free to type in the chat. I like that it's native and learned at the same time. I really like this. It can be learned. It's both. I like that there's this concept of both. Yeah, it can be. And what I like about that is when we talk about how intelligence is sort of measured and what do we have as a component, there is two major elements to this. And it really can be learned. And so we're going to talk about how things can be learned and what this type of intelligence looks like. So, and I love what I'm seeing from Kelly here that intelligence is more innate, but knowledge can be gained and learned. That is very true. Experience allows us to and give us wisdom in where it is. And that's where, Marion, I really like this approach of it's more about your capacity in your willingness to learn too. So as we go through this, what I'm going to share first and foremost is historically, the way intelligence was viewed was from a very much an IQ perspective. It was based on what you learn, what you retain, what you acquire. Most people had a score that was typically tied to it. And basically, where this was very much valued, all the way kind of happened up until about the 1980s, 1990s. And IQ was very, very popular as a measurement tool. It still is to some points today, but things have really changed. You know, when they looked at, oh, what was your IQ? Oh, if you had an IQ of 140, or if you had an IQ of 150, or you had an IQ of, then that's where they would make a determination on certain things. That doesn't happen anymore. And the reason why is because it's single dimensional. It's one measurement. And at that point, there is sort of this capping moment where it doesn't quite grow at any more capacity. But then why do people get hired? Why do people get put into leadership roles? Why do people continue to grow if our IQ doesn't? And the reason why that is because there's three components to this that go into play. The first piece that we look at is still IQ, right? The ability to acquire knowledge, the ability to gain intelligence in those cases. But the next thing that came into play was also EQ. And we're going to talk about emotional intelligence or your emotional quotient. What we're going to really dive with this is they learned that what you know wasn't quite as valuable at certain points as it was to demonstrate how much you care about the growth in yourself and others. And so the other factor that people look for is personality, or what we call behavior, right? Or the ability to adjust our behavior, the ability to be mindful of it. Those three things came into the play. And that's where we started looking at leadership, and not just we as like Educate 360, but we as human beings really started to take a closer look and say, we really need to reevaluate what real intelligence looks like. And so where this comes in is this emotional competence has become very, very popular over the last 20 to 30 years. And this is where they start igniting what we call a social brain. Every individual starts looking for new ways to not only develop their knowledge, but their ability to collaborate, to work together, to demonstrate empathy, to be able to use social skills and social cues to be able to work. Can we be able to demonstrate patience and care and understanding? The reason why that is because what we've learned is synergy. And I know that term gets used a lot in the workforce today, but the reason why is because there is this mindset that, man, if we have 1 plus 1, okay, that's 2. But if we have 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, it equals more than 5. It goes further beyond. And the reason why is because that synergy spurs up better dialogue, better idea sharing, better productivity, and better results. So with EI, what we're really trying to look at in this case is what tenets go into emotional intelligence that are so critical in today's society. The first piece, and going to Bradbury and Graves, I'm going to start first with Daniel Goleman, one of the inventors of sort of this emotional intelligence, wrote this in 1982, really focused on understanding the self and understanding how the self works with others. How can we be able to understand some critical components that really get people to understand each other? Then Bradbury and Graves turned this around and really tried to break down more of the components of what needs to be really understood. And there's 4 major areas that we have to consider. The first is self-awareness. And with self-awareness, the key thing behind this is your ability to understand truly yourself. These are the phrases of I am this. This is who I am. It's a true understanding of knowing thyself. And you have to have that level of self reflection, self understanding. There's a personal competence that goes into this. But that's where, if I asked you all the question, and you don't have to answer this on in the chat, but it is something worthwhile to think about, is who are you? What is it about you personally that people gravitate to? What do you think that is? And I want us to all think about that for a moment. It doesn't have to be typed in the chat, but I want you to think about that for a second. Your understanding of your care, and there are people typing in there. That's perfect too. Yeah. Some of us, I love this. And I don't want to mispronounce if it's Minaj. I love that. Is some people are motivators, right? Some people are truly empathetic. Some people are genuinely kind. Some people are very driven. Other people are more analytical. Other people are socially communicative. Other people are more observant. And what I mean by that is they are very good at sitting back and gathering information without having to say much. And so knowing thyself is a really important thing. Relatability. I love this terminology you're all bringing to the table. This is so good. This is fit. You all came to play today. I like this. But it is one of these things that you look and you start saying, this is who I am. And so that first piece of self-awareness is critical to look at. And I love the way that that was just said, is the awareness of how my actions match my personal value system. That, Josh, that couldn't have been said better. I think that that's a huge piece in saying, you know what? This is where my values sit. First piece is self-awareness. That's the first thing we have to look at. Once we do that, the next piece we have to look at is our ability to self-manage, or and I like this, open, accepting, and non-judgmental. This is perfect. So when I bring this up, it's one thing to be aware. The other thing that comes with that awareness is knowing what we're not naturally. Knowing what we're not naturally is important. So this might mean I'm not the most socially open person. Or, you know what? I'm not the most empathetic of people. Or, I'm not the most assertive of sorts. Or I'm not the most analytical or detail oriented. Or I don't really get into the big picture. I like the details. It's also understanding what you're not. So what we really get this, what we really get in this case is first and foremost doing what we call a self inventory. Leadership, and I don't mean management, I mean leadership. You can lead from anywhere. One of the most critical things I like to do with people, and we teach this in a class called Mastering Meaningful Engagement, is finding your NCUs. Your ends are natural. It's finding your ends, which are natural, mean that it's you always will have it. It's naturally built into your personal value system. You live it, you breathe it, it never goes away. Your C's are your comfortable changes. Comfortable changes. And what that means is I may be appearing this way, but that's me adapting to meet people where they are. And that's what we call a self-management or a self-regulation technique. So one example is very, very important is, and I'll share this about myself. I'll go a little bit more open here. I am very passionate. I could read the phone book and it would be the most passionate thing you'll hear. I know that that is my end. That is a natural thing that I have within myself that's part of my personal value system. What sometimes people think I am is positive, that they think I'm a very positive human being. That's not natural for me. I'm not the one that looks at the glass as half full. I do look at the glass and ask what's in it. And so that's where I sit a little bit more. But I think where my ability to be self aware and know that I'm not naturally positive allows me to know, you know what, people value positivity and I need to self manage. I need to self regulate. I need to adjust. And as the great Warren G. and Nate Dogg once so eloquently stated, we must regulate. And that's my cheesy 90s joke for the afternoon. Hang on tight. So we have to be able to we have to be able to regulate. We have to be able to adjust. We have to be able to adjust. And so knowing what you're not, and I love what Carrie says, is used to be very critical to something that I was not, and that's where we have to be mindful. Mindfulness gives our ability to be able to self-manage, to self-regulate. The you is what is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. And your ability to recognize what is uncomfortable for you is where change begins. And so we have to understand that too. I will tell you, I'll share this. If you ever look, I'm out of Pittsburgh, PA. I will tell you that the story. I am a seventh generation steel mill kid. You know, I will say that I'm the first one that didn't work in the steel mill in my family. It's a very gritty kind of character building, growing up mentality. It's if you I broke my hand playing baseball once, and it was one of those things of I couldn't get my glove back on, and that's what forced me to get out of the game. I'm not one for heavy empathy. It's uncomfortable for me. With that said, I know the value of it. It's uncomfortable for me, so I have to practice. I have to practice. And that's where when the self-management comes in, you have to identify what is uncomfortable for you so that you learn what you need to practice. And that's right there, ladies and gentlemen, where emotional intelligence can be grown. It can develop. It can thrive. It can always continue to grow. So that's where emotional intelligence has its real importance. The other two pieces are not about you. So the self-awareness and self-management is really about your ability to regulate, your ability to know thyself, to know what you are, to know what you may struggle with, and to know how you adapt. The next piece is social awareness. And social awareness is your ability to read others. And we call this reading the room or reading others or things like that. When we talk about social awareness, this is your ability to read what people value, to read what people value. It's your ability to look at somebody and go, this is a person that values this characteristic. And Mariella, who joined us as our host, I will tell you that she is kindness in a bottle. She values kindness. And so if I don't lead with kindness and communication with her, and if I don't mean it or I'm missing it, it's going to be no. So social awareness is your ability to read what other people value, to keep it at the forefront of your mind. And the last piece of this is the depth. And the depth is what you do with the action, which is relationship management. When I communicate with people, there's some people that I use bullet points because I know they like things quick and dirty, as we say. It's the one, hey, here's the information, blunt, 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 blunt. There's other people that I communicate with GIFs or GIFs, however you want to call it. I call it GIFs because it's not giraffical, it's graphical. So I always say that, some people I communicate with GIFs because they like the entertainment value. They like the care behind it. It makes it more fun in the communication. That's the relationship management, is your ability to understand what people really need in their ability to communicate. And so taking a moment to really understand this, we really have to understand first and foremost how insightful and aware we are. I think the other things is, how are we perceived? And I say this because there is some truth that perception equals reality. The other thing that we have to pay attention to is, how do we adjust? I will tell you that one of the hardest things that I hear in today's workforce, and I don't hear it as much, which is a good sign, is that's just who I am. And there's a difference between the intonation of saying, this is part of who I am, versus this is just who I am. The word just that gets in here is limiting. It limits you. It shows that there is now no longer a capability for change or adjustment or growth. And so I'm going to challenge you all to look inward and make sure that the word just doesn't get thrown around anymore when we say this is who I am. We have to lean into our ability to grow and change. That's how we do appraisals of our emotional intelligence. Now, I'm going to answer a few questions to take a brief pause because I love this engagement that we're having from here. So one question I have is, I'm empathetic. I'm also solution based, and I have a hard time for people that whine for whining's sake. How can we fix it? What I always try to do here, Damien, is what we call finding the 5% you can move with. And what that means is, I am going to empathetically listen, and I am going to sit and I'm going to really take the moment to understand what's the deeper pain occurring here. And then I'm going to take the 5% we can move with. What that 5% normally is typically asking people how they want to be listened to. And I mean this because what you just did was so great, is you asked this question for self-awareness, that you know yourself, you know what you value. I am empathetic, but I'm very solution-driven as well. The adaptation for self-regulation here is your ability to ask people before we dive in. And I will tell you, this is a cheat code in emotional intelligence. I will ask people, hey, real quick, before we dive in, do you need advice? Do you need a quick fix or solution? Do you need to just vent this one out? And I like to ask people that because they will then tell you what they want to get out of the conversation. And if they just want to vent, I'm not providing you a solution. I'm not providing any advice. I'm going to go straight to empathy mode, and I'm going to sit back and go, yeah, that does stink. That is awful. So I like to ask people when that comes in play. Yep. And usually advice or vent, I agree with that. That comes into play. But some people just need a quick fix. They don't need this long advice, but it's really a good thing that if they just want to vent, it allows me, yeah. And if they just need to vent, then I know that I'm not providing anything. So this is phenomenal. I love that as a question. I'm seeing also in a leadership role, we sometimes find situations that make us uncomfortable. What I always say with that is, what a better time to practice. How we grow, folks, is through EPR, exposure, practice, and reflection. That's how we grow. So it's your ability to expose yourself to those situations that are uncomfortable sometimes. And then take the moment to practice. You know what? I'm not great with tears. Can I say that and be open and honest? I'm not great with tears. I'm really bad with them. And I think you saw on my slide about myself, I have many children. We're foster adoptive parents. I have 4 daughters. I'm not great with tears. But whenever they happen, what better time to really practice and lean in and mean it? And I agree with Minaj. First listen, then understand rather than forcing ideas is a key skill. It is a huge skill. And as we go down, Carrie mentions, what if people perceive your positive attitude as being fake? What I always say in the positive attitude is, if it's perception, I guess my question first would be, why do you think maybe they might be perceiving it? That's always the first question I always like to ask. The second thing I like to ask is, what can I do to lean into it even more and be genuine? I always try to say, and one class I teach is I always with mastering meaningful engagement is finding the qualities that really hit you. And if you are genuinely positive, then lean in with optimism, lean in with enthusiasm. And the more that it's seen and the more that it's consistent, the more that people believe it. So I'm always a fan of replication. Replication's a big thing. How do you adjust when values and morals seem to lack in others and manipulation is the norm? Okay. I always have a cardinal rule in any class that we teach is, if you use any of this for manipulation, you'll bury your reputation. However, if you have somebody that is manipulating you with it, I go what we call net neutral. I go net neutral. I go straight into neutrality. If there's anybody that has a gaslighting personality or is manipulating to try to get their own values out of it, I will not. We're going to use that term in just a little bit, but I use what's called we language. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I'm going to hold for a moment, Brandy, but know that the key term is we language and neutrality. I'll demonstrate this a little bit later for you. And loving that. This is perfect. Loving the response. Yeah, you got to walk them through how to fix and not you fix. Sometimes they already know the fix, but their roadblock, right? Their roadblock is that they is the emotional roadblock and not the solutional roadblock. I love Michael. What Michael mentioned here is understanding the difference between hearing and listening. I'm really trying to take this, that listening requires a whole body element. So I will teach you in the remote strategies. I'm always on camera. Number one, always on camera. And the reason why I'm always on camera is because I don't want anybody to miss my tone or body language. I want to show you that you have my undivided attention. And by modeling, it has more of a likelihood to be repeated. And so what I always try to make sure of is, if something is uncomfortable, and what I mean by that is, I am positive, but sometimes maybe people don't see it, or people think maybe I'm being sarcastic. I always like to give a quick clarification because I am very blunt. I will tell you, I'm a very blunt, honest person, but I will say, hey, in this case, I am going to meet you where you are here. So bear with me. Like, I even try to say, I'm going to show you that I'm leaving my comfort zone here. That is the art of vulnerability. And if you can do that, that actually generates more meaningful personal power. How can you pick up on being manipulated? I think the question with that, Melissa, is asking yourself, is the goal self-serving, right? Is it self-serving? Is it other-serving? Or is it all-serving? And those are the three things that I always like to ask myself. If somebody wants something, I always try to look and go, is this just serving the self? Is this serving others? Or is this serving all? And what I always try to guide people to are solutions that serve all. So if you feel in that moment that this is self-serving and they're asking just to help the self, now if it's a kind ask or if it's something like that, that's one thing. But if it's something there where there's a request and it's only self-serving, there's going to be tactics you're going to see. You're going to see them bait you into dialogue. They're going to create so much urgency. They're gonna that's going to be where they come into play. And Lynn, I like this too, is blunt and to the point too, but with kindness. There's always room with a level of kindness, right? That's the idea, is your ability to show people your willingness to come out of your box is a huge skill. And I say that because I'm blunt and I'm very honest too, but I go to spaces of vulnerability sometimes. And it's not comfortable, but I know that what it's going to do is create mutual power in the way that we work. So I'm going to step off the ledge and get out of my comfort box. Great, great questions. Love the dialogue here. So then that leads me to this other sort of approach. Ready? When we self-regulate or self-manage, how do we do that when stress arises? It's one thing to do it whenever we're in a great mood and everything's peachy keen, but how do we do that whenever we hit stress? I see not very well. And I agree with that, Manoj, is that if more than 20% of the audience understand in a first go of that's being an achievement, I always try to say that take a moment and see, am I really hitting people? Am I really connecting with people? If I'm not, I don't beat myself up over it. But what I do is I try to look to say, what could I try next time? What could I adjust? What could I adapt? Breathing techniques, self manage, deep breaths, walking, take a day off, stress balls, step back. And that's where I love this, right? Stress is stress. And I'll tell you, it's 2025. Stuff's a little stressful, right? Workforce is stressful. Workforce is stressful, right? It is important. So to know what you do, what we call your reality checks is very important. Some people thrive in the stress and pressure. Some people are upset and they need to walk away. Some people breathe. Some people take moments. And that's right. Sometimes we may eat it. We may do. I love this honesty, this emotional honesty we're bringing to the table. And I will tell you that the first thing we have to do is recognize and acknowledge the actual feeling that's occurring. And right, pet the dog. I will tell you, I love my dog. I honestly, he may not be a therapy dog, but he should be a therapy dog because he is so great. When I say this, typically when we have things, there's either things that lead with shame, they lead with sadness, they lead with anger, fear, and then obviously happiness is a big thing. And I don't mean to go to Disney's Inside Out on this, but the reason why this comes into play is because if we can't acknowledge the feeling we're feeling, then we never really get around it in the first place. So we have to go through the modes. We have to recognize that that's where we are. And I always like to say, do you know what? I am frustrated. Or in this case, I am sad about this. I am fearful that this isn't going to work. And you have to at least take the moment to accept and acknowledge what you're feeling. And I love that Susan typed that in there, that I think is brilliant. Take a time out, allow myself to really think about what I'm feeling instead of just reacting to it. So this is a big thing that I always try to pay attention to first and foremost. What I also like to do is I allow myself to reframe. I allow myself to reframe. I always, and I think where people have a tendency, and I've learned that the people that have a tendency to strive under stress and pressure and do well is They take a situation and they can pivot their perspective. They can pivot it. We're going to give a few examples of this as we go. But this is knowing your triggers. This is your ability to say, you know what? I am going to adjust my approach. Maybe what that means is I have a friend and that friend is not clicking with me. And I might say, you know what? We're going to take a time out. That reframing might be, you know what? Space might be good for the both of us for the time being. It may give us peace for the small draw. That's why we look at those things. And when we do this, the ability of recognition and reframing, especially in a stressful environment, the sooner that you can acknowledge, recognize, and pivot, the sooner that your stress response from a physiological sense reduces. The situation may be unchanged, but your approach to it now is more effective. So, how I like to do this is as follows. Maybe it's a job interview that I have, which I'm going to be honest with you. I think I'm going to be with Educate 360 until I'm probably 311 years old. But imagine that there is a job interview. I'm nervous. I'm acknowledging that there's nerves. What I look at that is, I'm going to reframe that as, you know what? The fact you're still feeling those nerves shows you care. It shows your passion. It shows your excitement. We need to get a win. It's a big win here. Do you know what? What a privilege it is to be able to compete at a higher level. What kind of, I mean, that's excitement. I got a new boss I'm nervous about. You know what? What an opportunity to learn a new lens. I get negative feedback on something. That's all right. We don't like rejection. That's not a big thing. Do you know what? What a great opportunity to continue to grow as a human being. So, how people typically do reframing is normally whether it's through gratitude, whether it's through recognition, whether it's through deeper understanding. The way that I like to use reframing is your ability to take some of the worst situations and find the other side with it. When we reframe, we're able to recognize that first, we're acknowledging the feelings, but second, and the word and Becca, I would love for you to type that to the entire group. I just went to the host and the panelists, is growth mindset. It gives you this opportunity to always view things from a growth-based mindset. As human beings, we are not fixed. It is not a fixed approach. We evolve, we grow, we thrive, we find ways in the worst situations and find ways to always get out and do better. And that's a big thing. If somebody gives me feedback on something, my first thought turns into the Michael Scott no. If you've ever seen that meme or that case, what I always do is I'm like, no. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now that you got that out of the way, take a step back, understand what it is you're feeling in this moment. How can I reframe this? You know what? At the end of the day, this is good feedback. This is something I can take with me and maneuver. And I like this. You know what? And what a great way to bring in AI into this is when people start using AI, I always like to determine, is my perception reality? When we talk about net neutrality, that's a pretty important thing. Yeah, it is. And once again, the more that we avoid behavior, the more that it's going to come and get us. So I always try to say the sooner we can recognize and move through, the easier it becomes. And Manoj, I like the way of removing fear is appreciation. We teach in coaching. We have coaching classes, and the one thing we always teach is how to properly and meaningfully give feedback that is solutional, but also really, really understanding of who it is you're meeting with and who it is you're connecting with. Why I do this is because I always try to really give myself an opportunity to assess. I really try to ground myself back in reality. I try to look at things with an objective eye. One, and where I like that Michael brings in ChatGPT or AI into this case, I like to be able to sit back and ask myself the question of, would they say that I'm doing this? Would somebody else say that I'm doing this? Would they say that? Am I being different here? It is that moment of assessing that's really important. So, one thing that I'm going to teach you all is that if there is moments of manipulation, or if there are moments of stress, or maybe there's disconnect or disagreement or unhappiness, I'm going to teach you a technique I like to use. And what that is called is I and you messages. And what we do with I and you messages is we flip it on its axis and we go to we messages. And so the first thing that I try to do is I objectively, and I go net neutral, is I say what I'm observing, not what I'm feeling. I say what I'm observing first. I've acknowledged my feeling on this. So I'll give an example. In my past, I was in a leadership role, and I was younger in a leadership role, and a comment was made at one point in my career that I should sit back and listen more because I don't have enough experience. First thought that comes to your mind when you hear this, how would you think? What would be the first inclination that goes through your mind? Your first inclination. How do you know? Good. How do you know, right? Fair. Age doesn't correlate. There can be an ouch component coming in a little bit. I'm being seen as unequal, entitlement, frustration. It can be off putting. Of course. Disrespect, it can even be. Yeah. How many of you felt a little fury in maybe the neck area when that happened, if there's a show of hands? Exactly. And now that's the question that comes in after, Lynn, is this true? And that's where I have to do an assessment and evaluation of, is this actually true? Is this a situation that is accurate, or is this a situation that is maybe fear from another side? And that's where we start. So what we do is we question. So what I share is, and I use a phrase of what we call mirroring, and this is where the acknowledgement happens. I will say something objective like, okay, so what I'm hearing is that there is an importance on having longevity in a position. Understood. That's where I go net neutral. That's what I mean when people do this. I go net neutral. I don't add fuel to the fire. I don't add gasoline. I'm not going to do any of that. I go straight to net neutral. And one of the things I said is, okay, longevity in a position is important. Okay, understood on that end. What I also share, though, is what we call the larger effect on we. And this is where I will say, okay, how do we think this affects us as a whole if we only view with what has worked in the past? How do we think that may work? And that was a question I threw back to the table. If we went with only what has always been done, what could potentially be a problem for us if we do that? And the other person went silent. But do you know who did respond? Other people in the meeting. And they said, yeah, we wouldn't grow. We wouldn't make change if we didn't have differing perspectives. We wouldn't be able to do that. And so that's where when that happened, it gave a really good opportunity to describe an effect on how things affect not me personally, but us as a whole. The reason why you do this is because it disarms the other person. And it doesn't do it in a rude way. and it doesn't do it to where you're coming off as confrontational. It actually allows you to push this into a zone of discovery and still stay neutral. And yes, it does. It pushes you into the opportunity to look at the big picture here. So once we do that, I don't go to you language. You language is assumptive and it can be directional. So I never use you language. What I do is we're staying in the we. And that we language goes, because of this, I do think it is important that we really evaluate what ideas look like from multiple perspectives. I think that's how we grow, and that's where I'll make a meaningful suggestion on things that we do. The power of we is one of the greatest emotional tools because it's collaborative, it's disarming, and it never comes off as a threat. But if you're going to do this, you need to make sure the key word here is neutral. You have to go to a state of neutrality. I ramp down the passion, I ramp down the fire, and I go to more inquisitive nature. That's a technique, and that goes back to answering the questions from before whenever it was being asked, well, how do you work with somebody that might be manipulating, or how do you work with somebody that might be rude, or how do you work with people that don't get it? That's how I work with that. To be honest with you, I use this when people are narcissistic. It's a great disarming technique. Now, one of the things that I want to wrap up with today before we get to final questions and understandings is change is tough. Change is tough, folks. It really is. I really and Melissa, really great question there. And I'm gonna, and Chris, another really great question. I'm gonna answer those in just a moment. It can be tough. What I try to do is I build what's called emotional honesty with myself. And what I will do is I open up to somebody I trust and I say, hey, I need you to call me out on this if I'm wrong. I need you to do that. And I will go to somebody I trust. And that person will say, no, in this case, I think you're spot on. Or in other cases, they may go, I would have approached it a little bit more this way. Get that real feedback, that emotional honesty. One thing that was mentioned, I think, by, and I don't want to, I think it was by Minaj, was when we talk about celebrating achievements, I actively seek and compliment people whenever they're doing things amazingly. And I don't do it because it, is just a have to. I do it because I genuinely want people to notice that I notice. And I don't mean that for like, way to go, Jay, you did it. I want them to see that I notice their behavior and that it means something to me because it's connective. Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. And other word is that if you need a pick me up, find who your pick me up is. So I really genuinely want to thank you for joining this webinar. I mean it. I loved the feedback. I know we have a few questions and we're going to get to that. I am going to pass the mic back to Mariella and we're going to start seeing what other questions came in either from the questions panel or from the chat. Okay?
Absolutely. Alrighty, I will go ahead and drop this link for everyone to check out if they want to check a little bit more out on the amazing emotional intelligence offerings that we have. And I just wanted to take a second to thank our amazing engaged audience for all this awesome
Yeah.
feedback and these questions. Really awesome to see. Alrighty, I believe we'll kick it off with Chris. Should this process be out front in front of everyone in the room or in private in order to avoid future problems from this issue who's being called out via this process?
So in this case, Chris, that's a fantastic question. I always like to go net neutral and acknowledge at least a little bit of the elephant at first if you can stay neutral. If you feel like you can't stay neutral, then take it full private. But even in that moment, I'm not going to address the entire elephant and take up the entire meeting space to do it. But that we language is a quick disarming technique that allows you to progress and move on to the next thing. So I always say I like to use it as a quick disarming technique. After that, we move back to the topic. Then I would address it privately afterward and have a discussion a little bit. That is a fantastic question.
Yeah, and great direction for sure for that scenario. The next question here, do you find yourself counting to 10 before doing that? I have to assume that before that.
Yeah, but yep. Yeah. I really do what I honestly do, and I know this is gonna sound cheesy, but I think as you know, I'm a 90s reference person. I pull a great Ice Cube and I think Ice Cube in my mind, and I go, Jay, you gotta check yourself before you wreck yourself here. So the moment I hear something I don't like, I go straight to Ice Cube. And I mean it. I know it sounds cheesy. I know it really does. It means something to me. I go, Ice Cube, buddy. Whoa, Ice Cube. Check yourself before you're going to wreck yourself.
I
So I like to have a balance in that. The other thing that you can do, there's something called a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 activity that basically grounds you back into your senses. When you're really feeling a lot of pressure, pain, stress, I always try to find 5 things I can see, 4 things that I can, or five things I can touch, 4 things I can see, 3 things I can hear when I close my eyes, 2 things that I can smell, 1 thing that I can taste. And I try to give myself that ability to ground myself back into my senses if it's really frustrating.
Excellent next steps. Alrighty, and we have a couple more coming in. Thank you all so much for these questions. Great questions coming in. How do you handle a person who goes to everyone else with a problem and they never come to you?
Oh, really good one here too. What I typically try to do is I will get out in front of it. I will try to set up a meeting and I really try to lean with as much positivity as possible. Number one, I assume positive intent. I don't assume that they're not coming to me for a bad reason. I assume they might be going to people. That's where reframing comes in, is assuming positive intent. But what I do is try to find a workable solution on when there's an opportunity for them to come to me. So, hey, I know that maybe, you feel comfortable going to other people to communicate. I do love that. I think that's wonderful. I also want to share that there are certain things that if you do bring this up to me, if you do bring this, I would love to hear it. I would love to share this. I would love to be able to work with you on this. That would be amazing. So I invite them into the dialogue for the next time because we don't want to come off in this place of resistance. We're going to assume positive intent here. Great question.
Yeah, fantastic question. Lots of great feedback here. We also have one piece of feedback here from Michael. Understand who benefits from the change, you or the we. There is more resistance to change if others do not see the benefit or
I
value.
I love that. I fully agree with that, Michael. I think that that's spot on. Is I always try to look for ways that if I'm going to build a solution, I always look for the we. I really do. I try to look for the win-win. And there's different ways to conflict resolution. There's compromise. There's avoidance at times. There's accommodation. For me, though, I always try to look at things from a collaborative state to say, how do we both win in this? We all want something out of this. How do we win?
Positive collaboration. Absolutely. Love it. Alrighty. Well, we have a lot of thank yous, a lot of amazing insights here. So I did want to take a second to thank you, Dr. J, for all this fantastic insight. And I did want to remind our audience that if they want any additional info, please go ahead and visit us at watermarklearning.com or click on that link I shared in the chat. And just as a reminder, if anyone missed out on any part of this session or they want to go back and look at a couple of things, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar to all of you in an email. So be on the lookout for that. Alrighty, everyone. I think that will do it for us today. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. And we hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll hopefully see you all soon in the classroom. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.